One bridge, hundreds of lives. A secret worth killing for. A military experiment spins out of control, unleashing genetically engineered war dogs onto the Incheon Bridge. The survivors aren't just fighting to stay alive, they're fighting to reveal the truth. But the government has other plans. And they don't leave loose ends. Can they escape before they're erased? Catastrophe begins. The helicopter crash. The night sky was shrouded in thick fog, the red warning lights flickering against the metallic body of the Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk. It flew low over the Incheon Bridge, its engines humming steadily. Inside the dimly lit cabin, a group of Special Forces soldiers sat in silence, gripping their M4 rifles tightly. They had a single objective: escort a classified asset. That asset? A dog, but not just any dog. Inside a reinforced steel cage sat E9, its powerful muscles coiled beneath its sleek black coat. Its amber eyes scanned the cabin, cold, calculating. This was no ordinary military canine. It was the result of Project Silent, a top-secret bioengineering experiment designed to create the perfect killing machine. A deep, guttural growl rumbled through the cabin. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances as the cage rattled slightly. One of them, a seasoned operative, stepped closer and tapped his rifle against the steel bars. "Calm down, buddy," he muttered. Snap! A loud, sickening crack echoed through the cabin. In a split second, E9 had shattered the cage lock with a single bite. Before the soldier could react, the beast lunged, its jaws clamped down on his throat. A wet, gurgling sound replaced his scream as blood sprayed across the cabin. Chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted, raising their weapons. Too late, E9 was already airborne. The first soldier to fire missed. The dog twisted mid-air, dodging bullets with unnatural reflexes. Another soldier pulled the trigger. Bang! The round whizzed past E9's head, but before he could fire again, the dog's fangs crushed his windpipe in a single bite. The Black Hawk tilted violently. The co-pilot turned in horror as E9 lunged at the pilot, sinking its teeth deep into his carotid artery. Blood splattered across the controls as the pilot's lifeless body slumped forward, pulling the cyclic stick with him. The helicopter spiraled out of control. Down below, hundreds of vehicles were stuck in traffic on the Incheon Bridge, the thick fog making it impossible to see more than 50 feet ahead. Inside a Ford Explorer, an elderly couple listened to a news broadcast warning about dangerous weather conditions, unaware that death was descending from the sky. The Black Hawk pitched violently, clipping the steel cables of the bridge. Sparks exploded as the rotors shredded through the thick metal wires, sending electric arcs into the night. At the last second, E9 leapt from the helicopter, landing on the bridge like a predator stalking its next victim. Boom! The Black Hawk slammed into the road, erupting into a fiery explosion. The shockwave rippled through the bridge, flipping cars like tin cans, setting off a chain reaction of crashes and fires. Screams filled the air. The Incheon Bridge had become a war zone, and this was only the beginning. Inside the sleek Genesis G90, Jung-won gripped the steering wheel, his gaze flicking between the congested road ahead and the news updates on his phone. The latest polls showed HBC, the leading candidate in the upcoming South Korean presidential election, maintaining a strong lead. As the deputy director of the Blue House National Security Office, Jung knew better than anyone that politics was a battlefield with no room for mistakes. Every decision had consequences. Every move had to be calculated. His phone buzzed. A message from the campaign headquarters. Ensure nothing jeopardizes the election. Any misstep could cost us everything. Jung exhaled sharply, locking his jaw. He had spent his entire career in national security, rising from a field agent to one of the most trusted men in the administration. He had witnessed terrorist threats, assassination plots, and political scandals. But none of that compared to his biggest challenge today, his daughter. He stole a glance at the back seat. 17-year-old Kung Min sat with her arms crossed, headphones in, face set in a sullen scowl. She hadn't spoken much since they left the house. Jung sighed. He had arranged for her to study abroad in Australia, away from the chaotic political climate. It was the safest option, the only option. But to her, it felt like exile. "You hungry? We can stop before the airport," Jung tried, his voice softer than usual. Silence. She didn't even look up. Jung's grip on the wheel tightened. He had spent years protecting the nation, navigating power struggles and covert operations. Yet, here he was, powerless in front of his own daughter. The fog thickened outside as they approached the Incheon Bridge. Neither of them knew it yet, but their world was about to be torn apart. The night sky was swallowed by a thick fog, rolling in over the Incheon Bridge like a creeping phantom. Visibility had dropped to less than 50 feet, reducing headlights to dim halos in the mist. Hundreds of vehicles were trapped in gridlock, stretching across the massive steel suspension bridge. Inside his Genesis G90, Jung-won checked the time, 6:45 p.m. If traffic didn't clear soon, they would miss Kung Min's flight. A static-laced voice crackled through the car radio. "Traffic advisory. Heavy fog is causing dangerous driving conditions, particularly near Incheon Bridge. Drivers are urged to proceed with extreme caution." Jung tightened his grip on the wheel, frustration creeping in. From the back seat, Kung Min remained silent, scrolling through her phone, detached from the world outside. Suddenly, roar! A yellow Lamborghini Huracan screeched past, its engine howling through the fog. The driver, a cocky-looking young man, grinned as he glanced at his dashboard camera. He was filming himself. "Let's show these amateurs how to drive in the Arl." "Fog!" he laughed, revving the engine. Then he looked up. Too late. Red taillights appeared out of nowhere. His eyes widened in horror as he yanked the steering wheel, sending the Lamborghini into a wild skid. Screech! The car fishtailed, narrowly missing the vehicle ahead before slamming into the guardrail. Just seconds later, a tour bus, packed with passengers, came barreling down the lane. The elderly driver slammed on the brakes, but the wet asphalt offered no grip. Crash! The bus slammed into the Lamborghini, setting off a deadly chain reaction. A silver sedan tried to swerve, but clipped the wreck, sending it spinning sideways. A semi-truck jackknifed, its trailer swinging around like a wrecking ball, plowing into a fuel tanker. Then came the worst part. Boom! The fuel tanker detonated into a fireball, flames racing across the bridge. Inside a Ford Explorer, an elderly couple screamed as a runaway truck hurtled toward them. Screech! Crash! Metal crunched, glass shattered. Bodies were thrown like rag dolls. Jung-won felt the shock wave. "Dad? What was that?" Kung Min whispered, her voice unsteady. Jung's gut tightened with dread. Ahead of them, flames licked at the sky, and chaos swallowed the bridge. This wasn't just traffic anymore. It was a disaster. The experimental dogs' escape. The Incheon Bridge had become a war zone. Screams, explosions, sirens wailing. Smoke curled into the night sky as fires raged from the wreckage of overturned vehicles. But deep within the chaos, another deadly threat was about to be unleashed. A military transport. Truck lay on its side, its reinforced cargo doors bent and twisted from the impact of the crash. The once secure steel containment cage inside had buckled under the force of the collision. Inside, something stirred. Then, snap! The sound of metal snapping like brittle wood cut through the night. A single black-furred beast stepped out from the broken cage, muscles rippling beneath its sleek coat, amber eyes glowing in the darkness. Its name, E9. For a brief moment, it stood motionless, taking in its surroundings. Then, it moved. The first soldier never saw it coming. A blur of black, a flash of teeth. Blood sprayed across the asphalt. The man gurgled, clutching his torn throat before collapsing to the ground, twitching violently. That was the signal. The others followed. One by one, more cages burst open as at least a dozen other experimental dogs emerged, each one stronger, faster, and more lethal than anything nature had ever produced. And then they ran. Like missiles locked onto their targets, they shot out onto the bridge, weaving through burning wreckage, leaping over twisted guardrails, hunting. A traffic officer, trying desperately to direct survivors, heard a low growl behind him. He turned, too slow. E9 lunged. A single, effortless bite. His throat was gone. More screams. A woman fled from her wrecked car, only to be dragged to the ground by two dogs. Teeth sank into her flesh. She didn't even have time to scream before her body was torn apart. More victims fell as the pack ripped through the gridlocked vehicles, their enhanced senses detecting every heartbeat, every breath of fear. From a distance, Young-won watched, in horror. "Dad?" Kung-min whispered, her hands trembling. Young could barely breathe. This wasn't just a disaster anymore. It was a massacre. The situation spirals out of control. The Incheon Bridge was drowning in chaos. Flames roared from burning vehicles, black smoke coiling into the night. The air reeked of gasoline, blood, and death. The experimental dogs were loose, and they were hunting. Jung-won gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Through the windshield, he saw it all. Carnage unlike anything he had ever witnessed. People screamed, ran, collapsed. Some tried to fight back. A man swung a tire iron at an approaching dog, but before the blow could land, snap! A set of fangs clamped around his wrist. The man shrieked, dropping the weapon, only for another dog to pounce, sinking its teeth into his throat. Blood splattered against the hood of a nearby car. Kung-min gasped, covering her mouth, eyes wide with horror. From behind the burning wreckage of an overturned truck, more dogs emerged, each one covered in blood, their eyes glowing in the firelight. And then, in the distance, gunfire. Rat-tat-tat-tat! A squad of South Korean special forces rushed onto the bridge, clad in full tactical gear. Their M4A1 rifles lit up the night as they opened fire. Bang! 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 One of the dogs collapsed instantly, a bullet piercing through its skull. Another took a hit to the chest, but didn't stop. Instead, it turned, growling, then lunged at the nearest soldier. "They're not going down," one of the operatives shouted. More dogs charged through the gunfire, their genetically enhanced bodies shrugging off wounds that would have been fatal to normal animals. A soldier screamed as one of the beasts clamped down on his leg, yanking him off his feet. Another dog pounced onto his chest, tearing into his jugular. Within seconds, An entire fire team was wiped out. Jung-won's stomach twisted. These things weren't just mindless animals. They were trained killers. At that moment, something moved in the smoke. A silhouette standing perfectly still. E9. Its piercing amber eyes locked onto Jung's vehicle. It wasn't attacking. It was watching, studying, and then it started walking toward them. Jung's instincts screamed, "We need to move. Now!" But it was too late. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. Inside the high-security situation room at the Blue House, the atmosphere was ice cold. The glow from the massive LED monitors illuminated the tense faces of top government officials, their eyes fixed on live drone footage of the Incheon Bridge. Flames, blood, chaos. The massacre was unfolding in real time. At the head of the table sat NIS Director Dong Hunb, his fingers drumming against the polished wood. His whiskey glass sat untouched, the amber liquid barely rippling despite the tension in the room. A security officer adjusted his earpiece. "Sir, we've lost communication with the Special Forces unit. The bridge is a total loss." Another advisor, pale-faced, spoke hesitantly. "Should we deploy more rescue teams?" Bang! Hunb slammed his fist against the table, silencing the room. His cold, measured voice cut through the air. "We're not saving anyone." The advisor flinched. "But sir, there are still civilians." "They're already dead." Hunb exhaled, sharply, adjusting his tie. "The only thing we're doing now is making sure the world doesn't hear about it." The room fell into stunned silence. Then he turned to his chief communications officer. "Shut down all civilian networks within a 5-mile radius. Block all outgoing signals. No media coverage, no leaks. As far as the public is concerned, this was nothing but a tragic bridge collapse." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the press is already getting reports of explosions. They're asking questions." Hunby's eyes darkened. "Then give them answers." He slid a pre-written statement across the table. "Due to structural failure, caused by extreme weather conditions, Incheon Bridge has collapsed, resulting in multiple casualties. The government is working tirelessly to rescue survivors and assess the damage. We urge the public to remain calm." Lies. Back on the burning bridge, Jung-won clutched his phone, frustration boiling over as he checked the screen. No signal. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "They've cut the lines." Nearby, Yu-ra, a survivor who had been live-streaming the chaos, held up her phone in disbelief. "My feed just went dead. No connection." Jung clenched his jaw. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They're covering this up. From the distance, a Black Hawk helicopter loomed over the carnage. But it didn't lower rescue ropes. It didn't even attempt an evacuation. Instead, it dropped something. A massive black container, slamming onto the bridge with a metallic thud. Jung's blood ran cold. They weren't here to save them. They were here to erase them. Jung and Kung. Men face mortal danger. The Incheon Bridge was a hellscape. Fires burned uncontrollably, casting an eerie orange glow through the thickening fog. Wrecked cars littered the roadway. Some flipped, others still smoldering from earlier explosions. The bridge trembled under the weight of chaos. Inside the Genesis G90, Jung-won gripped the wheel, his breath unsteady. His training in national security had prepared him for many things, but not this. From the back seat, Kung Min's voice trembled. "Dad, what's that?" Jung followed her gaze. His heart stopped. A dog, but not just any dog. A massive, black-furred beast stood at the edge of the burning wreckage, its body silhouetted against the flames. Eyes glowing amber, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. 9. The monster from the transport truck. Jung's instincts screamed at him to step on the gas, but then he noticed something strange. E9 wasn't attacking. It was staring at them, studying them. Kung Min slowly opened the car door. "What the hell are you doing?" Jung hissed, reaching for her, but she had already stepped out. The moment her feet touched the pavement, E9 tilted its head slightly, as if curious. Kung Min pulled a small granola bar from her pocket, slowly extending her hand. "It's hurt," she whispered. "Look at its head. It's injured." Jung's pulse hammered in his ears. This was suicide. "Get back in the damn car. Now!" Before he could grab her, another sound ripped through the air. A snarl. A second dog appeared, twice E9's size, its teeth bared in a vicious growl. And this one wasn't hesitating. It charged. Jung reacted instantly. He tackled Kung Min, throwing her back toward the car. The dog lunged. Jung twisted just in time. Its jaws snapped inches from his face. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. The beast circled back, muscles rippling as it prepared to strike again. Jung scrambled for his Glock 19, pulling it from his holster. Bang! Bang! 2 shots hit the dog square in the chest. It didn't stop. Jung barely had time to react before it leaped at him again, jaws wide open. And then, out of nowhere, E9 moved. The black beast launched itself at the attacking dog, colliding mid-air with a sickening crunch. Fur, claws, and teeth tore into each other. A brutal fight to the death. Jung, still dazed, felt hands grabbing him. Kung Min. Dad. Get up! Jung staggered to his feet, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. Behind them the fight raged on. E9 was holding the other dog back. For some reason, it had chosen to protect them. Jung had no idea why, but he wasn't about to stick around to find out. Get in the car. Now! They slammed the doors shut, just as Jung floored the gas. The Genesis tore through the debris, leaving behind fire, chaos, and a war between monsters. The battle between humans and the dogs. The Incheon Bridge was an all-out war zone. Smoke curled into the sky, mixing with the acrid stench of burning fuel and charred bodies. The flames from the wrecked fuel tanker illuminated the chaos, casting long, flickering shadows over the carnage, and in the middle of it all, they were coming. A pack of genetically modified war dogs moved through the debris like a coordinated strike force. Their bodies were covered in blood, their eyes burning with a cold, calculated fury. These weren't just animals. They were predators, designed for one thing: eliminating targets. The first SWAT team barely had time to react. Rat-tat-tat-tat. Gunfire erupted as M4 rifles lit up the night, bullets ripping into the advancing beasts. One dog took a hit to the shoulder, another to the ribs. They didn't stop. One soldier hesitated, just for a second. It was all the time they needed. A black-furred blur tore through the air. Before he could pull the trigger again, a dog clamped, its jaws around his neck, dragging him to the ground. Blood sprayed in a violent arc. "We're being overrun," a lieutenant screamed into his radio. The dogs moved in perfect formation, dodging bullets, flanking the soldiers like highly trained assassins. One leapt onto the hood of an overturned police cruiser, using it as a launch pad, then slammed into a SWAT officer. knocking him clean off his feet. Another slipped through a gap between two wrecked cars, appearing behind a soldier who had no chance to turn around before teeth sank into his spine. Jung-won and Kung-min crouched behind a half-destroyed SUV, watching in horror. "They're too fast," Jung muttered. He had seen combat before, but this was slaughter. Suddenly, a helicopter spotlight blasted down from above. A military Black Hawk hovered over the battlefield, its minigun turret whirring to life. "What?" A hailstorm of 50 Frauleissig BMG rounds rained down onto the bridge, tearing through steel, flesh, and concrete alike. Boom! A nearby SUV exploded from the sheer impact, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Jung grabbed Kung-min and shielded her from the blast. When the Audi smoke cleared, the pack of war dogs was still standing, bloodied, wounded, but still moving. One of them, E9, stood in the center of the bridge, its amber eyes locked onto Jung. It wasn't running, it wasn't scared, it was thinking. And that was more terrifying than anything else. Jung swallowed hard. This wasn't just a battle. It was a war. The survivors' desperate escape. The Incheon Bridge was collapsing into madness. Smoke and fire choked the air. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the bodies of the dead littered the pavement. The once busy bridge had become a killing field, where humans were no longer at the top of the food chain. Jung-won wiped the blood from his forehead, gripping Kung-min's wrist as they ran through the wreckage. They had to get off this bridge. Now. In the distance, Joe Park's tow truck screeched to a halt next to an overturned tour bus. He jumped out, scanning the carnage. "Anyone still alive? Get in the damn bus." Yura helped drag an injured woman toward the bus, her hands slick with blood. Behind them, the pack of experimental dogs was regrouping. Jung and Kung-min sprinted toward the Mao bus, dodging burning debris and wrecked cars. A severed arm lay near their feet. They didn't look down. Just as they reached the vehicle, a deafening roar ripped through the night. E9 stood atop a crushed sedan, its amber eyes glowing through the haze. It let out a deep, guttural growl, a signal. The other dogs moved instantly. Massive black-furred beast launched forward, tackling a man just inches from the bus doors. His screams turned into gurgles as its teeth tore into his throat. Kung-min let out a choked sob. Joe grabbed her and shoved her inside. "Move!" Jung turned back. More people were running toward them. A middle-aged couple, hands clasped tightly. Together, their eyes filled with terror. They were almost there. Then, a shadow moved behind them. Jung's stomach dropped. "Run!" he shouted. The couple turned, too late. A dog lunged from the side, tackling the man to the ground. The woman screamed, reaching for him, only for another beast to drag her away into the smoke. Their screams cut off in an instant. Jung clenched his fists, helpless. Joe slammed the bus doors shut. "We can't wait anymore!" Outside, the dogs circled the vehicle, their claws scraping against the metal. E9 stood still, watching, calculating. For a moment, Jung swore it was smiling. Joe didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the gas. The bus lurched forward, tires skidding over broken glass and debris. The monsters chased them for a few seconds, then stopped. They didn't need to pursue. They already knew where the survivors were going. And E9 wasn't done yet. Senator Deng Hun exposed as the mastermind inside the Blue House Situation Room. The tension was suffocating. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the faint scent of whiskey. The giant LED screen on the wall displayed A live aerial feed of the Incheon Bridge. A disaster unfolding in real time. Blood, fire, chaos. At the center of it all sat Senator Dung Hunb, his fingers interlocked as he watched the footage in eerie silence. A security officer's voice crackled through the speaker system. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Special Forces unit. Survivors are attempting to flee." A nervous aide shifted uncomfortably, wiping sweat from his brow. "Should we deploy rescue helicopters?" Bang! Dung Hunb slammed his fist onto the table, sending his whiskey glass rattling. His cold, measured voice sliced through the room. "Rescue? There will be no rescue." A stunned silence followed. One of the advisors hesitated, his voice shaking. "Sir, civilians are still alive. If they talk..." Dung Hunb's lips curled into a slow, knowing smirk. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" He leaned back, in his chair, exhaling a plume of smoke. "If they live, this leaks. And if it leaks, I lose everything." He turned his gaze to the communications director. "Cut off all signals from the bridge. Scrub any existing footage. Control the media." The director swallowed hard, but nodded. A pre-written statement was already waiting on his desk. Due to unforeseen structural failure caused by extreme weather, Incheon Bridge has collapsed. Government officials are working around the clock to assist in recovery efforts. We urge the public to remain calm. A blatant lie. Back on the burning bridge, Jung-won clenched his phone. No signal. No emergency frequency. Nothing. His blood ran cold. "They've shut us out," he muttered. Nearby, Yu-ra, a journalist trapped in the chaos, held up her dead phone, her hands trembling. "They're covering this up," she whispered. Then, a deafening thud. A military Black Hawk hovered over the bridge, its rotor wash kicking up flames and smoke. For a moment, hope flickered in Jung's chest, but then, a massive steel container dropped from the chopper, slamming onto the bridge with a sickening crunch. No rescue, just containment. From his penthouse office, Dung Hunb watched, his expression unreadable. His voice was calm, emotionless. Let them burn. The final plan. Luring the dogs into the bus, the Incheon Bridge was on the brink of collapse. Fires raged. Smoke turned the air into poison. The ground trembled beneath the weight of destruction. Jung-won knew they were running out of time, though war dogs were still out there, moving through the wreckage like shadows. Their eyes gleamed in the firelight, their bodies tense, ready to kill again. They needed a way out, and fast. Joe Park's voice crackled through the smoke. "The bus is still running. We get everyone inside, and we're out of here." Young turned. The battered Hyundai Universe was still intact, wedged between two overturned trucks. It was their only chance. But there was a problem. The dogs were still hunting them. The survivors couldn't outrun them. That's when Dr. Park spoke up, his voice shaking. "We can lure them in." Jung's gaze snapped to him. "What the hell are you talking about?" "The dogs. They respond to specific frequencies. I can use my tablet to trigger their hunting instincts, draw them all to one location." Jung's mind raced. If they could trap the dogs inside the bus, it was insane, but it was their only option. The plan begins. Joe Park threw the bus into reverse, backing it into a wide-open space on the bridge. Yu-ra and the other survivors scrambled inside, eyes darting between the shattered windows. Outside, Jung stood in the open, gripping a steel pipe. He banged it against the pavement. Hard. Clang! 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 A low growl echoed in the distance. They heard him. From behind the wreckage, E9 emerged. The other dogs followed, their bodies tense, ears pricked. They were waiting, watching, calculating. Dr. Park's fingers flew across his tablet. Then, a high-pitched frequency cut through the air. The effect was instantaneous. The dogs snapped their heads toward the bus. Their bodies went rigid. Their breathing turned sharp. They were locked onto a new target. And then they ran. A tidal wave of black fur and muscle surged forward, charging straight for the bus. Young sprinted back toward the door, diving inside just as Joe slammed it shut. Boom! The first. Dog slammed into the side of the bus, snarling as its claws raked against the metal. The others followed, clawing, biting, fighting to get inside. The doors rattled under their sheer force. Joe hit the gas, but Jung shouted, "Wait!" Something was wrong. Through the windshield, Jung saw a figure still outside. His stomach dropped. Trivi, old woman. She had stumbled in the chaos, falling to her knees. Her frail hands clutched at the pavement as the monsters closed in. Jung moved before he could think. He yanked the door lever and jumped out. "Dad! No!" Hong-min screamed, but he was already running. The first dog lunged. Jung tackled the woman aside, shielding her with his body. A blur of motion. A body crashed into the charging dog. Jung whipped around. E9 had attacked its own kind. For a split second, their eyes met. Then, E9 turned, running with the pack into the bus. Jung grabbed the old woman and threw her inside, just as Joe slammed the doors again. Inside, the dogs thrashed violently, their snarls shaking the metal frame. Jung locked eyes with Joe. Now! Joe slammed the accelerator. The bus lurched forward, straight toward the edge of the bridge. This nightmare wasn't over yet. The fight for survival. The Incheon Bridge was crumbling. Flames roared from burning vehicles. Metal groaned under intense heat, and the remaining survivors ran for their lives as the experimental dogs tore through what was left of the battlefield. Jung-won barely had time to catch his breath. His body was aching, his wounds burning, but the fight was far from over. Inside the Hyundai universe, the captured dogs were slamming against the walls, their snarls rattling through the steel frame. The bus rocked violently as the beasts inside ripped and tore at everything in their path. Joe Park's hands were tight on the wheel. "We're running out of time, Jung. The bridge isn't gonna hold." Jung turned, scanning their surroundings. There was only one way out. The edge of the Daipim bridge. They had to jump, but first, they had to deal with E9. The final stand E9 stood at the center of the bridge, staring them down. Blood dripped from its black fur, its amber eyes glowing through the smoke. It was watching, calculating. It had already survived gunfire, explosions, and a brutal battle with its own kind. Now, it stood between them and their only escape. Jung raised his Glock, but deep down, he knew a single bullet wouldn't be enough. Joe slammed on the gas, the bus roaring forward, straight for E9. At the last second, the beast dodged left, launching itself onto the roof of the bus in a single inhuman leap. Bam! 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 Jung fired through the windshield, but E9 didn't stop. It sprinted toward the front of the bus, claws scraping against the metal. Then, it leaped. Crash! E9 smashed through the shattered front windshield, landing inside the bus. Inside, the other dogs went silent. Then, they turned. E9's amber eyes locked onto Jung's, and then it attacked. Jung barely had time to react before the beast lunged. Boom! The force threw him back, his gun skidding across the floor. E9 was on him instantly, its massive jaws snapping just inches from his throat. Jung grabbed its neck, using every ounce of strength to hold it back. But it was too strong. Its teeth grazed his skin, hot breath against his face. Jung's arms shook. He was losing. Then, bang! A gunshot. E9 yelped, staggering back. Kongmin stood behind it, her hands trembling around a smoking revolver. She had shot it. But E9 wasn't dead. It turned, its furious eyes locking onto her. Jung felt his blood go cold. "Run!" he roared, but before Kongmin could move, E9 lunged. Jung threw himself forward, a desperate last effort. He grabbed his Glock, aimed, bang, 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 3 shots, all center mass. E9 stumbled back, blood spraying from its chest. It gasped, legs shaking. Then it collapsed. The bridge shook violently. Joe yelled from the driver's seat, "We're going over!" The bus hit the edge, then soared off the bridge. Everything went black. The final chapter. The truth exposed. Dark waters swallowed. The wreckage. The Hyundai universe had plunged off the Incheon Bridge, crashing into the freezing sea below. The force of impact sent shockwaves through the water, scattering debris across the surface. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then, a hand broke through the waves. Jung-won gasped for air, his body burning with exhaustion and pain. He scanned the darkness, searching. Kongmin. There! A few feet away, she was struggling to stay afloat. He fought through the icy current, grabbing her just before she slipped under. "I got you," he choked out. "Hold on." In the distance, floodlights from incoming rescue boats cut through the smoke. The South Korean Coast Guard had arrived, but something felt off. The boats weren't hurrying to pull them out. Instead, they were scanning the water, looking for something, or someone. Jung's gut twisted. They weren't here to save survivors. They were here to silence them. The cover-up begins inside the Blue House. The atmosphere was ice cold. Senator Dong Hunb sat at the head of the table, his whiskey glass untouched, his gaze locked onto a screen displaying live news feeds. Not a single word about Project Silent. Not a single mention of the war dogs, the massacre, the truth. Only government-issued statements blaming the disaster on structural failure due to unforeseen weather conditions. It was a perfect cover-up, or, so he thought. A phone buzzed. A nervous aide hesitated before whispering, "Sir, there's a problem." Dong-hun looked up, irritated. "What problem?" The aide swallowed hard. Deputy Director Jung survived. Hunb's hand tightened around his glass. "And?" The aide hesitated. "He's talking to the press." Hunb's eyes went cold. The truth cannot be buried. Standing in front of a sea of reporters, Jung-won's body ached from his injuries, but his voice was strong. This wasn't an accident. The cameras flashed. The crowd fell silent. Jung's jaw clenched. The government did this. The military created these genetically modified war dogs under Project Silent. When it failed, they tried to erase all evidence, including us. Like, reporters exploded with questions. Are you saying the government deliberately covered this up? How many people were left to die? Who's responsible? Jung looked directly into the camera. Senator Dong Hunb. Back at the Blue House, Dong Hun watched the live broadcast, his face unreadable. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Justice won't stay. Silent days later, classified files on Project Silent were leaked. The scandal made headlines worldwide. CNN, BBC, the New York Times. Dong Hun resigned in disgrace, facing a full-scale criminal investigation. But for Jung-won, this wasn't the end. Standing on the shoreline, watching the waves crash against the rocks, he felt Kung Min's small hand slip into his. "Dad, do you think there are more secrets out there?" Jung didn't answer immediately. He stared at the horizon, the wind whipping against his face. Then he spoke. "There always are, and I'm going to expose them. What do you think about this story? Did the government do the right thing, or was this an unforgivable cover-up?" Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss. If you were in Jung-won's shoes, what would you have done? Would you risk everything to expose the truth? Like this video? Smash that like button to support the channel. New here? Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another thrilling story. Share this video with your friends. Who do you trust when things go south? The truth should never be buried. Let's keep the conversation going.